some, it's various people are connecting, so a few minutes wait, then we can start. So now can we start?
Yes.
Thank you. So thank you so much for joining us. This pre-session of water and disaster of 4th Asia Pacific Water Summit. My name is Yumiko Asayama, manager of Japan Water Forum, and also the secretariat of the Asia Pacific Water Forum and 4th Asia Pacific Water Summit. We are organizing Asia Pacific Water Summit in 23rd and 24th of April in Kumamoto, Japan, as well as online. And this pre-session of the water and disaster and climate session will be also one of 9 parallel thematic sessions organized on 23rd of April in April. Then, this session is kindly led by, Professor Koike, Director General of the ICHARM, and they are kindly coordinating, this, pre-session following the, key theme of the Asia Pacific Water Summit, that is quality growth, which satisfies the all of sustainability, resilience, and inclusiveness. They are discussing this issue in terms of science and technology, governance, and finance. Today's session, we will discuss the issue of water and disaster and also the opportunity for future in terms of finance. Now, I would like to pass the floor to Professor Koike. Koike sensei, よろしくお願いします。
Okay. Thank you very much, Yumiko-san. And I'm Toshio Koike, the Executive Director of the ICHARM. I'm very happy to work together with you, especially by the great contribution and the leadership by the Asian Development Bank to have this finance pre-session of our 4th Asia Pacific Water Summit. Theme 1, water and disaster and climate change. As Yumiko-san introduced, this is our holistic framework of this summit. To the quality society, we need to strengthen the governance and deepen our understanding of science and technology, and we need to encourage the finance. So today, we would focus on finance. How can we improve our resilience and sustainability with regard to the water and disaster and climate change. So we have 3 presenters from the local and national who can cover the local and national reports. 1 from India, 2 from Japan. And the 3 report from the from the international point of view, 2 report from the Asian Development Bank, and 1 report from Mitsui, the Corporation, the Global Strategic Study Institute. Mr. Hongo, Takeshi Hongo, will join this meeting at the during this meeting because he's now joining another very important governmental committee. So then we would have a panel discussion. We have already identified 2 questions. So this water and disaster and the climate change. We have the overall structure, that is called as end-to-end approach on the climate change adaptation, from the scientific approach, the engineering approach, and socio-economical approach. As I mentioned, we established the governance and the science and technology and finance. Today, we would focus on today we would focus on finance. We have already had a pre-session on the governance and science and technology in February. Following such a discussion, we would focus on the finance today. So firstly, we would invite Mr. Bibu Goel, Kolkata, the Environment Improvement Investment Program, India. Mr. Goel, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much for the nice introduction. My name is Vibhu Goel. I'm the project director, Kolkata Environmental Improvement Investment Program. I'm joining from a place called Kolkata in India, which is Kolkata is located in the eastern part of the country. First and foremost, let me extend my warm greetings to all the participants here, and let me extend my heartfelt thanks to Asian Development Bank, which has given me this opportunity to provide my thoughts as far as financing water-related disaster risk adaptation is concerned. Namaskar to all of you. As in the introduction also Yumiko was saying and Toshio Koike-san mentioned, water-related disaster has become a very, very important, so to say, milestones in designing the policy aspect for any country. If we talk about water-related disasters, there are various reports which mentions that these sort of disasters, whether it is floods, droughts, windstorms, they account for almost 90% of the most disastrous events since 1990. So when we say about water-related disasters and the policies and the finances involved in tackling these, what we are basically talking about is all the nitty-gritties involved in developing policy framework, including finances, which the national government and the state governments have to tackle to make the citizens cope with these disaster-like situations. Yeah, first slide, please. Yeah, so when we talk about Kolkata, I want to just give a very brief overview about what the city looks like. Kolkata city and the Kolkata Municipal Corporation, where we are operating, it is approximately 200 square kilometer in area. It is divided into 144 small areas, which we called as wards, which are the core components of the metropolitan area. The population is approximately 4.6 million, according to 2011 census, and it has a huge population density of 24,760 persons per square kilometer. I mean, it's one of the most densely populated areas in the country. The municipal corporation per se accounts for approximately 1/3 of the metropolitan area. However, it has only 10% of the area. So you would appreciate that it's very densely populated, 4.6 million people living together in a constrained environment, what to say. More than 1/3, approximately 1/3 of the population lives in the slum areas. Again, very hugely densely packed. Add to that, there is a very important river called Hooghly River, which, because of which there are tidal overreaches in the area. Once a part of the wetland area, still the transition to the urban settlement because of the wetland makes it a very climate prone to climate differences, the entire area. Elevation of the area is 1.5 to 9 meter above the mean sea level. Next slide, please. Well, we talk about Calcutta, and as Rudyard Kipling once mentioned, the city of Calcutta is chance directed and chance erected. Chance directed, why? Because the governments over a period of time with the initiatives have made it a livable area. Chance erected because a lot of natural factors and the other climatic conditions have created some of the zones in the area, in the Kolkata area, because of which we have to face a lot of uncertainties over a period of time. So when we say these various factors which causes flooding or unnecessary water logging, what are these factors? Yes, of course, there are natural factors, excessive rainfall, wetland area is there, marshy areas are there, monsoons are there, a lot of topical, you would say, thunderstorms are there, which causes flooding. Not a flooding per se. There is no recorded event of mass exodus in the area, but yes, people are temporarily shifted from one area to the other. So that is one natural factor. There are some developmental factors also which causes waterlogging. Development factors includes a lot of unplanned expansion of real estate, a lot of unplanned exodus from outside areas to Calcutta. It is one of the very most important area in the entire Eastern India. A lot of economic activities are there, so a lot of migration is there. There are also environmental factors which I mentioned. Monsoon is one of them. Then you have so many last 2 or 3 years we have seen a lot of topical cyclones have hit us. Cyclone Fani has hit us. Cyclone Amphan has hit us. So because of these environmental climate changes, these factors have caused a lot of waterlogging in specific, some of these specific months, like starting from May and June, July, August, September, October, November. Out of 12 months, approximately 5 to 6 months, we have to face a lot of waterlogging in the areas because of these combination of the factors. Next slide, please. Yeah. So what have we done? What has the government done to mitigate some of the challenges, some of the waterlogging areas? Asian Development Bank is financing and is helping Government of India and Government of West Bengal for more than 2 decades. Now, because of this intervention, Kolkata Environmental Impact Program, the KEIP, this is name of the program which the governments have designed based upon the ADB intervention. The KEIP is closed. The KEIIP, the Kolkata Environmental Impact Program, this tranche 2 and tranche 3, this is in vogue. What we have done and why we have done all these things, because we have found out from our history that in this area we had deficit in sewer network and treatment infrastructure. Localities have remained vulnerable, either due to the topography, which we mentioned, and because of the development activities also. Therefore, the historical sewer networks and treatment infrastructure has not been able to cope with the realities today. Second point would be a drainage infrastructure is facing deficiencies. Why? Yes, population is increasing. Economic activities are increasing. There is a lot of pressure on the already existing resources. We have seen that we would require more drainage and more state-of-the-art drainage infrastructure. That's why ADB has come in. Third point, localized land use, socioeconomic and environmental problems. A lot of combination of these. We have a constrained land for which resources are limited. The economic activities are increasing. The people's aspirational abilities, the people's aspirations are increasing, because of which there is a constraint on local resources. Hence, we thought, the governments thought that in participation with Asian Development Bank, we will improve the condition, we will improve the slum areas, we will improve the connectivities, we will improve the drainage areas, we will improve the water pumping stations. And of course, last but not the least, and that is the basis of today's my presentation, deficit in financial resources and institutional capacity. Now, when we talk about the final point, I want to dwell deep into this. Next slide, please. We have seen that over a period of time, the user charges for municipal services have not increased commensurately with what the pressures on government resources are. So when we talk about the financial resources and institutional capacity, we wanted to take certain economic, so to say, grants and certain loans from external donor agencies, from the developmental banks, so that we can improve these our internal capacities. ADB had come forward in 1998. The governments had tied up. We went into these programs called KEIP and KEIP. Right now, the tranche 2 and tranche 3 of the KEIP, which includes approximately $300 million of external funding, shared with Government of India. So 75% approximately ADB share and 25% in the internal government sharing. What we have done with this sharing, the grants, the basically loans and some part of grants is, we have developed huge sewerage and drainage networks. We have developed 46,000 sewer connections, kilometers of drainage canals, bridges, pumping stations, relocation of the families, in fact, relocation of the families who are very vulnerable. We have developed sewage treatment plants, solid waste collection units, and this all could be possible because of the wonderful coordination between the Asian Development Bank and Government of India and Government of West Bengal. What we are right now seeing is because of the impact of these programs, for more than 1 million households, 24-hour water supply is available. 5 million people, I am very happy to share with the August audience here, 5 million people are directly involved with their standards have been improved. In fact, much more than that as we are talking about. There has been a systematic data collection, data supervision, and implementation of we call it K-flood. My next slide will talk about this, a flood forecasting warning system. So what we have done is, next slide please. Sewage drainage, pumping stations, improvement of slum areas, the improvement of canals. Next slide please.
Mr. Goel, could you please summarize your presentation?
Yeah. So what we have developed is a flood forecasting and early warning system, GIS mapping of the entire area, mapping of various sensors, IoT devices, and linked it with all the water bodies and the streets in Kolkata area to have a very good and robust system by which we can understand that floods or waterlogging is coming. Thank you. Next slide, please. Yeah, so this is a theory. Just closing slide, please. Next, yeah. So what we have, the Government of India's takeaway as far as the public-private partnerships are concerned is that what we require analysis of proper planning going ahead. And if the planning is proper, we can probably invite robust private sectors partners to come with us to realign towards a sectoral approach, develop standard principles and good practices and cross-learning. Strong civil society is always needed for wonderful cooperation and making the entire program a success. Thank you very much for your time. Yeah.
Thank you very much for your introduction to your very fruitful experiences and achievement. It's a very informative. Thank you very much. Next, we would invite the Miss Hitomi Miura,
Yes.
SEKISUI Chemical Company, Japan. Miura-san, floor is yours.
Can you see my slide?
Not yet.
Not yet. Sorry.
Yes. Yes, we have.
Okay.
Yes, thank you.
Okay. Yeah. Thank you for your introduction. I'm Hitomi Miura from SEKISUI Chemical Corporation. Today, I'd like to introduce a few examples of initiatives at the SEKISUI Chemical Group. So, and SEKISUI Chemical Group considers ESG management aims to achieve both into improving social sustainability and profitable growth for the group. This is an offensive ESG management in which we strategically identify social issues and continue to generate innovation and actively work to resolve them. This is a conceptual illustration of ESG that embodies this concept. It strengthens governance and stands out for resolving human resources, CS and quality, and environmental issues. By solving the social issues through the 4 business domains related to life, we will deliver the value of peace of mind for the future to society. And climate change is one of the important ESG challenges we are addressing. We are working strategically to reduce risks and transform them into opportunities in the 4 growth business domains company-wide. Until 2030, we will develop businesses in the 4 business domains of residential, advanced lifeline, innovative mobility, and life science, and in the energy field as the next frontier domain. And as a conglomerate developing various businesses, we are targeting to double our businesses by implementing a management strategy that solves social issues. So, in scenario analysis, we have identified driving forces that will have an impact on the future in the 5 business domains, including the energy field as the next frontier domain. We recognize that the driving force common to all 5 business domains is regional decentralization and urban concentration, other than climate change. These driving forces were selected because we believe the range of impact and uncertainty depending on the scenarios is high for these driving forces. Based on these 2 axes, we envisioned 4 future scenarios, a future scenario society with uncertainty, in order to extract factors that change the natural environment, innovation, and lifestyle in each society, adapt to any of the 4 society, reduce corporate risks, and sustain businesses that have turned into opportunities. We reconfirmed the measures and business strategies. In particular, even if mitigation efforts are made, if mitigation doesn't progress more than expected, that is assuming 4-degree, for example, C scenario, we were able to confirm that risk reduction, opportunity measures, and business strategies have been established as climate change adaptation, while national and global goals are growing demands for low carbon are accelerating mitigation efforts. It may not have been possible to review strategies for adaptation from the same perspective without conducting scenario analysis. And as a result of scenario analysis, we were able to reaffirm that our strength as a conglomerate is growing. We analyzed that the 28 technology platforms we have cultivated in each of the businesses in the business domains complement each other, reducing each risk and turning them into an opportunities. For example, housing technology, which is being promoted to mitigate climate change, is improving solar and storage battery technologies to promote conversion to renewable energies. In another example, with the assumption that EVs will become the mainstream for mobility, it's possible to further develop storage batteries. However, if regulations don't progress and as a result, disasters occur frequently due to rising temperature. Owning storage battery technology can be applied to developing a power source that can be used in the event of a disaster, and so on. Currently, businesses that contribute to climate change adaptation include products that contribute to the resilience of water infrastructure. And we are expanding these products both in Japan and overseas to strengthen our company and our global value chain. Let's take rainwater storage material as an example. This product, which uses 100% recycled plastic and has a void spaces at over 95%, can potentially reduce flooding and other water disasters in the event of torrential rain by installing the system underground. Since it has a high load capacity, this is advantageous that the ground above can be effectively used for parking lots and playground. This business has expanded into the domestic market by installing the system through individual projects, such as parking lots for condominium and playground for school, and in response to the rise in climate change disasters. We are expanding into two major markets. The first is expanding into overseas markets. We aimed to expand and develop businesses in geographical areas where drought and heavy rains occur frequently due to the effect of climate change. This includes areas that are production bases for our products, such as vehicle materials, raw material suppliers, and customers' production bases. And they are also areas where climate change disasters are intensifying. Targeting these areas also help reduce risks by capturing new business opportunities and strengthening our company's global value chain. In Japan, we expanded our business from project-specific installation to urban development project and gained a new foothold in the infrastructure planning and development businesses in collaboration with local governments. When considering a business that adapts to climate change in this way, we are considering business strategies with the prospect of reducing risks to our company and society, and keeping in mind the technology platform and that we own or acquire in the future. Yeah, this concludes my presentation. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much for your introduction to the new strategy and also create a new business opportunity based on the scenario analysis by the effort of the private sector. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
So next, we would invite Miss Ayako Tori, KPMG AZSA Sustainability Company, Japan, for her introduction to TCFD, Task Force on Climate-Related Financial Disclosure. Tori-san, the floor is yours.
Okay, thank you. I'll start my presentation. Hi, my name is Ayako Tori, and I am an assistant manager at KPMG AZSA Sustainability. And thank you for giving me this opportunity. Today, I would like to present about climate change and TCFD. So before talking about TCFD, I would like to talk about changing business environment and investors' perspectives. Our current business environment could be described as VUCA world, which stands for volatility, uncertainty, complexity, and ambiguity. And in the VUCA world, it is hard for the investors to assess companies' future performance in the long term, and unexpected events could lead to the loss of companies' free cash flow. In order to reduce such risks, now the investors try to evaluate risks related to sustainable corporate value through ESG lens, which stands for environmental, social, and governance. So this is the background of why the ESG market is growing. And now I'd like to explain about PRI, who leads ESG investment. So PRI which stands for Principles of Responsible Investment, is a UN-supported network of investors, and the PRI demands financial institutions to incorporate ESG criteria into their investment decision-making. And the number of PRI signatories is increasing. And there are 3,826 PRI signatories as of March 2021. And this graph shows how rapidly ESG investment market is growing, especially in the last 5 years in the world. And now I'll talk about the history of development of this TCFD, Task Force on Climate-Related Financial Disclosure, with emerging investors' need for companies' reliable climate-related financial information. The Financial Stability Board, FSB, established the TCFD in 2015, and in 2017, the TCFD released climate-related financial disclosure recommendations designed to help companies provide better information to support informed capital allocation. And in 2019, the Japan TCFD Consortium is established by the Ministry of Economy, Trade and Industry and private corporations. And in Japan, now around 700 organizations support TCFD, including both private and public sectors. In the world, around 3,000 organizations support TCFD. And I would like to explain about the link between TCFD and ESG. And on this chart, it says institutional investors. Most of them are called ESG investors. And on the institutional investor side, they are seeking for sustainable profitability for the mid-long term, so ESG investment. So corporate disclosure is a critical source for the understanding companies' climate-related risks. And for the financial assets, changes in the mid-long term values of financial assets could be attributed to climate-related risks, and financial system may collapse due to the sharp fall of financial assets. And thus, TCFD bridges those both needs, and TCFD plays a key role for the unexpected climate risks. And now I want to look more into what TCFD recommends companies to disclose for the investors and stakeholders. And TCFD is structured from 4 categories. One is governance, second is strategy, third is risk management, and fourth is metrics and targets. So whoever supports TCFD, the companies needs to disclose in terms of these 4 categories. And I believe the SEKISUI, before the presentation before mine, she explained a lot about how her company did and examined about this strategy, especially the part C. And I will talk what in strategy category, what the companies needs to describe. And there are 3 points that companies needs to describe. And first is describe the climate-related risks and opportunities the organization has identified over the short, medium, and long term. And B describes the impact of climate-related risks and opportunities on the organization's business, strategy, and financial planning. And C describes the resilience of an organization's strategy, taking into consideration different climate-related scenarios, including 2-degree or lower scenario. And in the next slide, I want to look more into what this means by risks and opportunities. TCFD identified specific risks and opportunities. And here it illustrates what it means by risks and opportunities. Risks could be categorized into 2. One is transition risks, and second is the physical risks. And opportunity, and on the other hand, opportunities. So there's the company's transition risks and physical risks and opportunities. This would affect to the financial impact and which would influence income statement, cash flow statement, and balance sheet. So thus, in order for investors to make financial decisions, it is necessary to understand how climate-related risks and opportunities in investment decisions affect future cash flow, assets, liabilities, and companies are required to disclose information on financial impact. So this is how related to each other. And for the physical risk, TCFD identifies specific to physical risks. And first type is acute risk. And acute risk is the increased severity of extreme weather events such as cyclones and floods. And chronic risks is the changes in precipitation patterns and extreme variability in weather patterns. And for instance, these physical risks may cause reduced revenue from reduced production capacity. And this is what companies needs to take into consideration. And TCFD recommends companies to discuss these metrics and targets. And this also includes the physical risks. And I'll talk about this. So there are 7 metrics that companies need to consider disclosing. The third one is the physical risks. And this includes amount and extent of assets of business activities vulnerable to physical risks. So specifically, for example, number and value of mortgage loans in 100-year flood zones, or for example, proportion of property, infrastructure, or other alternative assets portfolios in an area subject to flooding, heat stress, or water stress. So now companies are required to assess these risks and needs to disclose to the investors. Basing on my consulting service experience, many of the Japanese companies have hard time assessing these risks because sometimes they do not have much information, or sometimes they don't know where to find the correct information. So I believe there is some room to improve in the open platform or accessibility of this kind of information. And I hope this TCFD will enhance companies' climate resilience. And this is my presentation. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Tori-san, for your overall introduction to TCFD, and also very important the approach and also the mind of the private sector investor, the investment by the private sector. Miura-san is a company side, and you introduce the investor side. It's a very good information, and thank you very much.
Thank you.
So next, we would like to invite the international report. Firstly, Mr. Jeffrey Wilson, Asia Development Bank. So Jeff, please, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Dr. Koike, and thank you for this invitation to speak at this pre-session on finance. Good day, everyone, from the Asian Development Bank. In this presentation, I will cover how resilience against water-related disasters is being financed and how MDBs work alongside governments, NGOs, and the private sector to build the financial landscape that strengthens resilience. I will provide an introduction of the various financial mechanisms which result in infrastructural and social service projects in developing countries that protect communities from water-related disasters and help them adapt to climate change. Although the water sector includes many subsectors like water supply and sanitation, I will keep my presentation to the area of water-related disasters. Next slide, please. Thanks. Water-related developments require finance. The financing of water-related disaster projects is either by national and subnational governments or by external agencies. Internal budget allocations are the main in-country investment. A variety of externally supported programs are supported by external overseas development assistance funding from donors, from CSOs, NGOs, international finance organizations like ADB, and of course the private sector. And activities typically include loans and grants for infrastructure, technical assistance, capacity building, knowledge creation, development of policies and regulations, and for monitoring and evaluation. Next slide, please. Thanks. Even without climate change, most countries already require significant investment to address water-related risks. To build climate change resilience in the water sector will require investments in water resource development and coastal, riverine, and urban flood risk mitigation measures in order to minimize the climate change impacts. ADB estimates that developing Asia will need to invest $1.7 trillion a year if the region is to maintain its growth momentum, eradicate poverty, and respond to climate change. Estimates specifically for coastal and riverine flood risk management investment are sparse. An OECD study summarizes the top 10 countries in the region where the annual investment needs in flood risk management are the greatest. OECD estimated that 40% of development investments are prone to climate change hazards. According to the World Water Assessment Program, climate change is costing the world between 5 and 20% of GDP each year. The World Bank has estimated that with less than 0.5% of GDP, adaptation could remove around 70% of climate change damages by the end of the century, at a cost that would leave net damages reduced. The Global Commission on Adaptation estimated that investing 1.5 trillion euro in early warning systems, resilience infrastructure, improved dryland agriculture and crop production, protected mangroves, and resilient water resources could create close to 6 trillion euro in benefits. This is a fourfold return on investment. The total climate finance committed by major MDBs in 2019 accounted to about $62 billion US, out of which nearly 2/3 were allocated to less developed and middle-income countries. On average, 76% of total climate finance was allocated to mitigation and 24% for adaptation. In 2021, ADB elevated our ambition to deliver climate financing to $100 billion US over the 2019 to 2030 period, with 66 billion US for climate mitigation finance and 34 billion US for scaling up transformative adaptation projects and enhanced resilience. Various financial instruments are being used to address water-related disasters. They include grants, loans, bonds, and blended finance. Loans and grants are the most common financial tool available by national and subnational governments. Most OCR lending is around the LIBOR rate. Concessional loans, which are loans made on more favorable terms than the borrower could obtain in the marketplace, are also available for ADB's poorest developing member countries. Various co-financing tools have emerged by forming partnerships between MDBs, international development funding agencies, CSOs, and the private sector. And several climate funds have been established over the last few decades, which co-finance climate change mitigation and adaptation. Normally, grant funding is provided for technical assistance, including project preparation, demonstration and pilot activities, and actions for promoting climate resilience. Technical assistance facilitates the preparation of proposed investment projects and programs, and grants help developing member countries improve their capacities and make better use of their development resources. In many cases, grants are linked with loans. In addition to financing investments, ADB funds sector development programs, policy-based loans, and results-based loans. And these provide more comprehensive support to undertake important policy and institutional reform. And financial instruments such as green and blue bonds and blended finance have been promoted to engage the private sector and CSOs into the water sector. However, financing alone will not be sufficient for meeting the 2030 agenda of water security. Improved service delivery and building transparent governance and trust amongst users are necessary alongside new and improved financing arrangements. In response to a disaster, funding may be obtained to help reinstate normality via aid, credit, loans, reassignment of funds from planned expenditure or savings, insurance, reinsurance, contingent disaster financing, and other financial mechanisms. Flood preparedness should ensure that such funds are easy and rapidly mobilized when the flood occurs. The most cost-effective way of financing disaster response is through a suite of tools under a common framework that addresses the various layers of risk. No single instrument can optimally respond to all disaster events, which range from the frequent small-scale events to the rare catastrophic events. This requires a risk-layered approach, using risk information to establish appropriate and adequate financing plans for each layer of loss, ranging from high-frequency, low-intensity events to infrequent extreme events. Contingent disaster financing, or CDF, is a funding mechanism that offers guaranteed credit in the aftermath of a disaster. ADB introduced the contingent disaster financing under policy-based lending in response to natural hazards in 2019 to provide quick dispersing and flexible financing for ADB's developing member countries impacted by disasters triggered by natural hazards, for example, tropical cyclones, floods, earthquakes, droughts, and tsunamis. CDF covers the medium-term risk layer. CDFs are designed to be used for events approximately every 3 to 10 years, and is not designed to be dispersed on an annual basis for very high-frequency events. CDF was designed for ADB to provide assistance at the inception phase of emergency response in the form of contingent budget support to complement other emergency assistance modalities and financing sources. Loan processing and essential developing member country policy dialogue and reforms are completed before a disaster occurs. Recipients of the arrangement are expected to improve preparedness ahead of the occurrence of the event. The CDF is accompanied by policy actions focusing on measures to enhance long-term disaster resilience, which helps address the underlying sources of vulnerability to mitigate disaster risk. Such an arrangement enables ADB to engage in upfront and in-depth policy dialogue on disaster resilience and preparedness in collaboration with our partner governments, and rapidly deploy funds for post-disaster response. Disbursements are triggered after an actual disaster is confirmed by the declaration of a state of emergency or its equivalent. Between 2016 and 2021, ADB approved 22 CFD operations to 12 developing member countries for a total of 1.17 billion. Private finance. The public sector dominates water sector infrastructure financing, with 92% of water sector investments in the region carried out by the public sector. In contrast, the private sector finances more than 75% of the telecommunications sector and close to 50% of the power sector. Most climate resilience investments are currently made through public sector by the respective governments and and MDBs as loans and grants. The private sector is only a relatively minor player, mainly due to the lack of financial viability of many of the development and resilience projects. The insurance sector has shown interest, but risk insurance coverage in most of Asia and Pacific countries is still quite low. Flood risk management projects are not particularly attractive to the private sector, as there is often seldom possibility for revenue generation. Government investments and insurance remains the main mechanisms to build resilience against water-related disasters. And as I finish up, as population and urbanization grows, water scarcity and water-related climate risks will increase, and developing countries will be forced to invest. Flood forecasting and early warning systems are cost-effective in significantly reducing damage and losses and loss of life from extreme events. And the maintenance of these systems need to be supported with sufficiently earmarked funds. Spatial planning and water resource management are essential to ground resilience and avoid maladaptation. Capacity building of city, subnational, and national level government staff is essential to sensitize them to climate change impacts and resilience. And finally, there is a vital need to support water conservation, reuse, and nature-based solutions. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Geoff, for your identification of the financial big gap, and also the introduction to the financial instrument, including the CDF. And they also identify the role of the private finance. And last part is a very important message. I much impressed. Thank you very much for your very informative presentation. So next, we would like to invite Mr. Christian Walder, Asian Development Bank, for his introduction to Asian water development assessment. Yes, the Christian, floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Professor Koike, and very good afternoon to everyone joining the session today. It is my great pleasure to be with you at this finance pre-session of the 4th Asia Pacific Water Summit. In the next couple of minutes, I am planning to talk about one of ADB's flagship publications, which is the Asian Water Development Outlook 2020 on the topic of achieving water security in Asia and the Pacific. My name is Walder. I'm a water supply and sanitation specialist working with ADB's water sector group. The Asian Water Development Outlook goes a long way. It is one of ADB's key and flagship publication, and the first edition has been published back in 2007, with subsequent publications in 2013, 2016, and the latest one in 2020. It's basically an assessment of a national water security across 5 key dimensions. And actually you can see those 5 key dimensions on the right side of the slide, starting with key dimension 1, which is rural household water security, key dimension 2, economic water security, key dimension 3, urban water security, key dimension 4, environmental water security, and key dimension 5, water-related disaster security. Each of those key dimensions is made up of different sub-indicators, and you see those sub-indicators with the bullet points below. I don't want to go into detail in all those sub-indicators, but just that you get an impression that this is a very comprehensive assessment of a national water security. So many indicators and lots of data go into the assessment of this index. And this is actually available for all our developing member countries. This is also important to know because sometimes you have data for respective for particular countries, but the Asian Water Development Outlook really provides this assessment for all ADB developing member countries. And we see that this is a very important tool for our partners and our governments in terms of their policy and investment decisions in the water sector. The rating of the Asian Water Development Outlook is according to 5 levels. You see them here, starting with the nascent stage, which is the lowest level. And there is a definition behind saying a low proportion of rural and urban households have access to basic water supply and sanitation services, and the economic water security is low. You can read out those definitions. And then we have the following stages: engaged, capable, effective, and also the model stage being the highest stage of the national water security in the respective country. The next slide gives you a quick overview about the results from the latest Asian Water Development Outlook that has been published in December 2020. And I really want to focus on 2 key points here. So on the one hand, you see that there is no country in the model stage. So there is no 5 all in the Asian Pacific region. Even the developed economies such as New Zealand, Australia, Singapore, Japan, there is still things they can improve in terms of their water management, and they are in effective stage, but not yet in the model stage. On the other extreme hand, you see that there is still 1 country in the nascent stage, which is Afghanistan, in our Central West regional department. So there is still a long way to go to improve water security in Afghanistan. But you also see many countries which have the labeling of 2 and 3. That means they are in the engaged stage or in the capable stage. Even though they are in the engaged or capable stage, there is still a long way to go in terms of improving their water security across the 5 key dimensions, which I explained before, and significant investments will be needed to improve their water security. And referring back to all the details that Geoff has provided in terms of the investment needs, there is still a long way and a significant mandate both to the public and the private sector to increase financing in the water sector in order to improve water security in our countries across Asia and the Pacific. As I said, the Asian Water Development Outlook goes a long way. And one of the big advantages is that we can really make a comparison between the different years of assessment. So what you see here at this slide is really a comparison of results between 2013, 2016, and 2020. And The good message is that there is a positive trend generally, and we see the development in terms of the water security in several countries. For example, some of them have really managed to step up from the nascent and engaged rating to the capable and effective rating. And you see two selected examples here from PRC, but also from India. These are significant developments, and when you download the report, the Asian Water Development Outlook, you will see specific information why this increase, why this step up happened. Obviously in India, we know with the Swachh Bharat missions and all the other initiatives that really focus on, for example, providing people with water supply and sanitation services. This really had impacts on the national water security of a respective country. And it's important to give this information to countries so that they can plan their investments and their policy recommendations accordingly. But nevertheless, as I mentioned, challenges remain. Far too many people in our region still live in the nascent and engaged stages of water security. They are facing challenges in collecting their daily water, which might not be on site in terms of the water supply. They are prone to disasters and many other examples. So we have to focus on those most vulnerable communities, vulnerable people in our region, with the goal to improve their access to water supply sanitation services and more generally to improve the water security in a respective country. Let me summarize with some key recommendations from the Asian Water Development Outlook 2020. And definitely it is important to position water as the centerpiece of sustainable rural development. And you have some examples here, for example, by promoting water-effective irrigation agriculture, community-based water and sanitation services, but also locally resilient disaster risk reduction activities. Then also achieve urban water security by investing in water supply, sanitation, disaster risk reduction infrastructure. In terms of water resilience, this has to be an integral element of all planning approaches when talking about urban water security, but also to provide a healthy environment, because we know water systems are interrelated, everything is connected. And this is important to drastically reduce pollution, stimulating circular economy, increasing terrestrial protection, and as also Geoff, my colleague, mentioned, embracing nature-based solutions. And more general, and this is actually one of ADB's big priorities at this point, to increase resilience of water systems, to avoid water-related disasters, and to prepare for climate and other global changes. This is one of our key priorities going forward. We have ambitious goals in terms of climate financing, and we will definitely incorporate these goals and translate them into our water sector, into our investments. With this, I would like to invite you to download the Asian Water Development Outlook, to dig into more details of the respective key dimensions, and please feel free to get in touch anytime if you have any respective or particular questions on the Asian Water Development Outlook. We are very happy to respond and to work together with you in case you have any questions. Thank you very much, and Dr. Koike, back to you.
Thank you very much, Christian, for your introduction to the Asian Water Development Outlook. The 2020 included some chronological change from since the 2013, and also the geographical distribution of the current status with regard to the 5 key dimensions. Thank you very much. So finally, we would like to invite the Mr. Takashi Hongo, Mitsui company, the Global Strategic Study Institute. Hongo-san, are you now okay?
Yes, I'm fine.
Okay, thank you very much. So your floor is yours.
Yeah, thank you very much, Professor. I'm very happy to attend this and to make a comment on water-related business triggered by climate change. Thank you very much. I think this is a really interesting and also very important issues. And for business sector, this is very new. And now we are fighting with this new issue and the new business opportunity. So I would like to share my slides.
Yes.
So can you see this one?
Yes, we can see, but if you can use a slideshow, is maybe better.
Slideshow, yeah. So,
Presentation.
yeah, but I'm afraid that I can see the slideshow button at the backside of the instructions.
Yes, slideshow and left-hand side.
Yeah.
Oh. Hongo-san, now you are muting. I think we can see your screen clearly.
Okay, yeah, I would like to start it. Thank you. So yes.
Yes. Yes.
Thank you very much. Sorry. So first of all, I'd like to explain why private business are interesting, and also what is the driver of private investment to water-related business. There is a two option and two approach. First one is the very conventional one, seeking for profit or seeking for return. Regarding the water-related business, a very conventional type of water-related business by the private business is the water supply to municipality and also industry. This is very limited among the total volume of the water-related business. Why is such a small number of water projects are covered and implemented the private sector? Its background is economics of the project. So return from the project should be exclusively obtained by the private sector. That is an important thing. So the many of the water-related project is public infrastructure. Its return, economic and social return, will be shared by the public, not the company only. How to exclusively obtain the profit, that is important for the private sector. So particularly the water-related business triggered by climate change, it's not easy to secure the benefit, economic benefit for the private sector. It's not so easy. So this is a very big challenge for the private sector. However, the risk management, that is another issue. So negative impact on water project by the climate change, that is obvious and become big issues. So also we have to think about another issue, another emerging issue, that is risk of the depletion of natural capital. So due to the climate change, for instance, river water flow will be decreased, and also the too much demand for the industry and municipality, water resources are depleting. how to effectively use the water resources. That would be a very important matter for private business. This is a part of the risk management. So I will explain the IFAS later. So anyway, so the private sector are requested to seriously consider the water-related risk caused by climate change and also the depletion of the natural capital. In that case, the scenario analysis is necessary because the impact of the climate change, to some extent, we can see some of the event, but the maybe much bigger impact will be emerged maybe 20, 30 years later or after 2050 or. So the when and how likely event, climate-related event will occur, that is important. So the essence of my message on this slide is risk management by the company. This is important because for the company, controlling the risk on the project, that is a kind of the benefit for private sector. So reduce the loss. That will be a positive impact on a private sector's business. But please remind risk management option on the risk management investment by a company is a business opportunity for another company. So that I said, seeking for profit, seeking for return, it's not easy, but when we focus on the risk management side, this is a business opportunity for many private companies too. And also the essence and the issue asked by the secretary, the finance. Finance is important, but I would like to say, if risk and return are reasonable for the private investor, finance will follow, because now the international finance market, many private finance are available, and many finance investors would like to find a good investment field. So if risk and return are reasonable, finance will follow. That is an important message on this slide. Second slide I show you is International Finance Reporting Standard. So this is similar to TCFD, but I think this impact of the IFAS, the disclosure policy, is much bigger, because the International Finance Reporting Standard, IFAS, is a de facto global standard for stock market and bond market. So most of the international company adopted the International Finance Standard. So if the IFAS disclose and decide the disclosure policy, many company, major company have to follow the guidance of disclosure policy, ISB's disclosure policy. So I show the major point of the content of the fiscal risk here. Purpose of disclosure is information providing to the market. So because the IFAS, the major target audience is investors. Investors are worried about the risk of climate change, physical risk on a project. They would like to know more about the potential impact on a project. And the coverage of disclosure, this is also important point. Not only the project or company itself. So this disclosure policy seeking for the information disclosure of its supply chain. So how to get the material from, and also energy, and what is who will use your product, supply chain, value chain, whole value chain, whole supply chain. This need to be reviewed. That is the important point of the this disclosure guidance. And also how to disclose and what kind of information shall be disclosed. One important thing in the scenario analysis. And also the need to show ratio of asset vulnerable to climate change. So the physical risk, there are two types of risk, acute risk and chronic risk. Cyclone, drought, flood, wildfire, and also change of precipitation pattern, temperature rise, sea level rise, everything will be included on this disclosure policy. So this guidance or this project policy is now, it is a draft stage, and the official draft will be disclosed maybe this week. And maybe after second half of April, 2-3 months public consultation period will be made. And maybe within this year, this disclosure policy will be determined. And at the very beginning, this is not a mandatory one, but as I say, impact on disclosure policy by IFRS is significant, and many companies will follow this guidance. And the next slide shows a possible impact on the business. This is a physical risk, chronic and acute, both are here. And the red character, like right side, it's a flood and the wildfire, etc. This is also already emerged at the business field, and the chronic risk is maybe a little bit early to say whether we can say right now or not. But the both chronic and acute risk need to be reviewed. This slide is a part of my presentation to the International Energy Agency. International Energy Agency is very sensitive to the climate change risk too. How to secure the energy supply, particularly the electricity supply. So climate risk is very sensitive. They are and they are reviewing what kind of measure and what is the approach to the security of the electricity and energy supply. This is just information. And the next slide shows the risk management process, cycle of climate-related risk management. So the first point is screening. The private sector participated or implementing many very big number of business. So they all the climate-related risk due diligence, if we'd like to do for all project, its burden is too big. So first step is screening, identification of higher risk business. So types of business and the location of the project, etc. So we will choose some climate very sensitive project. Then we'll move to detailed analysis, taking into account of topographic effect and infrastructure. So important thing is infrastructure. Project itself, the location is where if the place will be affected by climate change, highly likely. But if good infrastructure, well prepared infrastructure are there, the actual impact on the business is not so big. So after the detailed study, consideration of countermeasures. So in that case, the business impact and the cost of countermeasure need to be evaluated. And next one is implementation of measures, physical measures like constructing and some physical protection equipment, and also economic measures. Previous speaker mentioned about climate-related insurance. Economic measures is also important. In that case, for the private sector, important thing is resilience. That means not necessary to reduce the impact by climate change on a project, but more and further important point is how to restore the damage caused by the climate change event. So the resilience is important and a very important key for the consideration and implementation of countermeasures. And of course, monitoring is necessary. So the incorporation of the scientific and technological development that is important and need to be feedback to the this climate-related risk management cycle. So as mentioned, how to recover, that is important too. So this is a basic concept of the climate-related risk management. And this seems to be new for business, but I don't think so, because this is a very similar way of thinking for business continuity plan, which is implemented in major company, most of the company. So the application of business continuity plan, BCP, that is a risk-related risk management by the climate change too. So next slide, I would like to show the possibility of public and private. So the private sector's risk management cycle, as I mentioned, but it is not enough to do by the private sector. Private sector's capacity is limited. So private sector need have a kind of support from the public. So I would like to show 3 points about the public sector support to the private sector's involvement. First one is scientific analysis, and that would be useful for screening and detailed analysis. So for instance, IPCC report published the risk and likelihood of the climate change pattern are shown, but their information is very wide, like East Asia. But East Asia consists of Japan, Korean Peninsula, China, Taiwan. So it's too big for screening and detailed analysis. Further information we need. So the D4 PDF by DIA, for instance, such kind of information is very useful for private sector. And another expected support is left side bottom. It's infrastructure development. Private sector's effort to the infrastructure preparation is limited. So we are private sector expected to have a combination of our own effort and the public sector's effort. And the last support we expect is insurance. The ADB colleague mentioned about the insurance, but what if the many events will be occurred at the same time? Insurance system is going to be collapsed. So international reinsurance market are there, but I'm afraid its capacity is limited. So as a backstop, if the public sector support the international reinsurance market, that will be very, very helpful for the private sector's activity. My conclusion, so 3 points here. Climate-related water investment by private company is important, but further scientific and economic studies are needed. And second, exaggeration to say too much about the climate-related risk is harmful. So the objective and reasonable scientific analysis is critical. And the last one, a very important point is improved scientific analysis and rational measures will reduce public and private sector's burden. So the effective analysis and measures that will be reduce the cost. And public, private, and scientists combination and collaboration is needed. That is my message. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Hongo-san, for your very big contribution. Your introduction to the new approach by the International Financial Reporting standards, the IFRS, and also your proposal on the cycle of the climate-related risk management. Really informative, and your suggestion, public support to private sector, on 3 point is very, very important, and also the conclusion. Thank you very much. I know that you are so busy, but if you have time, we have 2 questions, but you have already answered to the second question and also the first question. If you have, I would share my screen. If you have any comment on with regard to the question. Question 1, how should stakeholder work together? You have already done, but if you have a additional point, please introduce.
Thank you very much. So I'm not a scientist. I am rather economist. So I would like to say important, but now we need to more study more the improvement of the science and technology. So continue the discussion and making effort to improve the science and technology. That is my message. And thank you. That's it.
Thank you very much. You have already answered to the second question. Thank you. Thank you very much. Just a moment. How can I move? Okay. Yeah. Thank you very much. The 6th presenter. According to the original schedule, it's the end. It's closing the end of this session, but let me summarize our input from the presenter. Sorry, this one. Mr. Jeffrey Wilson identified the very big financial gap in water-related disaster and climate change, and he introduced the various financial tools. And Mr. Christian Walder introduced the current status in Asia Pacific region compared with the status in 2013, and its a spatial distribution, geographical distribution of our situation based on the Asian Water Development Outlook 2020. And Mr. Vibhu Goel introduced the Kolkata Environmental Improvement Investment Program. This is also long-term program since the 2013. It is now close to the final stage in 2023. The comprehensive approach focusing on soil and also the financial gap and also capacity and institutional capacity gap. The project try to fill the gaps. And Mr. Takeshi Hongo introduced the wide framework of the financial or investment. But his one word is very, very impressive. The finance will follow according to the company's effort, based on the scientific the evidence. So this is very important message. And Miss the Ayako Tori introduced the mechanism of the task force on climate-related financial disclosure framework. This is the four keywords, the VUCA, and how to address the physical risk. So, and the Miss Hitomi Miura, the SEKISUI Chemical Corporation, they introduced their effort, actual effort, based on the scenario analysis, and they identify the tasks taken by the company. And I think we can cover the very overview from the public effort and also the current status and ongoing the private sector effort with regard to the investment and the finance against the water-related disaster and the climate change. We have a big, we got the very important information and also the experiences. So yeah, I prepared the two questions as described in my slide, in the concept note, but all of the presenters have already addressed how can stakeholder develop the condition necessary to increase the finance commitment from public and or the private sector, and how should the stakeholder work together to provide end-to-end solution in cooperation with science and technology and governance at a different spatial scale in thematic and functional terms to take concerted and collaborative action. We have a good example from the sixth presenter. Thank you very much for your cooperation. I would pass my microphone to the Yumiko-san, the secretary of this meeting.
Thank you so much for Koike-sensei for making a very good summary of this session of finance for water and disaster session. And I also thank you for all presenters for making very, very good informative presentation. It is very, very useful for filling the gap of finance for water and disaster section, and also identify the opportunity not only for public sector, but also for private sector in Asia and also international scale. And this session will be summarized well and reflect well for the design of water and disaster session, which will be held on 23rd of April. So your cooperation and collaboration with us is very, very helpful for successful implementation of the summit and also this session. Thank you so much for listening for this webinar, and we will be able to provide recording of this session maybe tomorrow or until by Friday. So we will provide all the link for recording through email. Thank you so much for listening, and we are also very looking forward